Welcome back to our show. I'm Alexa, your netball bestie, and together with Jenna, this is your netball besties. This is where we deep dive into the SSN game analysis and what the netball world is currently talking about. Round 14 and the normal season is officially finished. Fever have secured a record-breaking 12 game win run, which is unbelievable. We had massive news this week, which was, of course, from Jo Harten announcing officially to the public that she will be retiring from professional netball, making this round her final professional netball game that we will ever see her play. We had some really shocking games this weekend, actually. Particularly the Firebirds versus Swifts game, which I know you've watched and I've seen just highlights of so far. So we will definitely get into that and figure out what on earth happened, because definitely on the edge of a massive upset there. Of course, the game of the round was, oh gosh, it hurts my heart to even talk about it. Thunderbirds versus Lightning. This was obviously a do or die game for both of these teams, who were essentially playing for that final top four position. Otherwise, their season would be ending. And as we are all aware, unfortunately, that was Lightning, whose season had ended. And we will also deep dive into that game as well. Don't forget to hit that follow button and please leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoy this episode. And a huge thank you to everyone who already has. This is, of course, our final episode of normal game time. We will be, of course, making episodes continuing into the finals games. But I just want to thank every single one of you who has supported us from day one. Obviously, this is our very first season doing this, and we hope to continue in the following seasons and, of course, during Diamonds games as well. So thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. Jenna, can you please break down the games and the scores for us?
Yep, so on Saturday we had the Giants versus the Mavericks, and we saw the Giants get the win 74 to 59. We also have the Thunderbirds versus Lightning, and the T-Birds took the win 59 to 55. On Sunday we had the Firebirds versus the Swifts, which went into an overtime thriller with the Swifts taking the win 79 to 75. And we finished out the round with Fever versus Vixens, with Fever in yet what I would call another dominant performance, securing the win 71 to 60.
All right, first game of the round, Mavs versus Giants. Now, of course, as we mentioned, this was Joe Harten's final game, so there was a lot of emotions flying around for this game in particular. And I think everyone just kind of wanted the Giants to win and finish on a high. And boy, did they. We actually had Tilly starting in goal defense, which was a little bit of a surprise to everyone, given that O'Brien had been having such a strong season. But we did later find out that was due to her having pulled something or slightly injured her shoulder. So that just meant that she had to quickly run off and get strapped up fairly heavily before then she was injected back into the game. What I saw was really interesting was we actually saw Sasha and Jovic called for a short pass around the circle edge near the pocket, which was almost the exact same position that they got called for a short pass last week. We don't actually see short passes called that often. I would say we've probably only seen maybe 3 this entire season, and 2 of them, unfortunately, were those 2 by the Mavs. Sasha, I think, had her best game of the season so far. Not to say that this was the best game we've ever seen her personally play, because we have seen her be a phenomenal dominant GA before. The Mavs won the quarter by 1, so it was still a really tight contested game. The second quarter, it continued to be really close as we led into that super shot time, which we just knew was going to be dramatic given the teams that were playing. The Giants started sinking, but it ended up actually being 31 all at halftime anyway, as we led into the third quarter. Jenna, what were your thoughts on the first half?
Yeah, I think there was definitely probably a lot of panic when we saw Erin not take the court to start. But I was really glad to see that, a bit of strapping tape, and she was out there ready to do her job. And you wouldn't even know she'd hurt it. She was out there and she was impactful, which was really great to see. I did notice as well, like Glasgow was injecting herself early into that game, which was nice to see. I noticed as well in the second quarter, there was a little bit of scrappy play coming from both sides. A lot of push and shove going in in that circle between Jock and Casey as well.
Going into the third quarter, so out of half time, we had a little bit of a ping pong lead as the game continued to stay fairly tight. Jock's core strength, in my opinion, was the MVP here. She took some passes on that baseline where it was quite phenomenal to see her be able to actually keep that in play and pull her body back onto the court. You could see that Casey Coppola was starting to get quite frustrated with a few of the umpire calls, which I would agree a couple of them, were questionable going both ways. But it was quite amusing to see Casey get called for an obstruction call, and then what she did was essentially take a humongous, like over a meter step to get into to set the penalty, kind of just to highlight to the umpire as to how far away she actually was, which was, it was entertaining to see. I did think that that same umpire did call a very fast held ball on Sasha as well in the circle. I thought that was an interesting choice. The Giants did finish the third quarter up by 4, leading into the final quarter, which was such a good game. Sliger was incredible. Some absolutely mind-blowing intercepts by her. Absolutely have been obsessed watching her play this season. Right on the end, we saw Joe Harton take a super shot in the final seconds of the game, even though the Giants were already up by this point. It was such like a significant moment that I think just encapsulated Joe as a whole as a player, which is just how incredible she is as a super shot shooter and just a leader in the game. Yeah, it was such an amazing moment, and the footage of the end of that game was just something that, yeah, definitely brought tears to my eyes. What did you think, Jenna?
Yeah, as you said yourself, I think watching Slager just get better each week has just been so exciting. I think they even mentioned that she was second behind Latanya Wilson, but she's just been having such a great game. And if anyone deserves a Diamonds call up, I think it's her, to be honest.
Oh, 100%.
In the fourth quarter, I did notice as well, it felt a little bit too late with the super shots for Maps. With Glasgow starting strong, she did sort of quieten up as the game went on. So I feel like we still get to see the best of her. Hopefully this off season, we see her get back to what we know she's capable of, especially when Mavs players are playing for contracts as well. And it was, I must say, it was a very emotional moment, seeing the cheer come from Joe once she landed that super shot. And I remember when I saw Sophie with the ball in her hand, I was like, oh my God, you have to pass it to Joe to sink that last shot. And she did. And what a great moment. She's had such an amazing career. What a way to go out.
Now, I've been seeing some of the edits of her popping up on my Instagram today, and yeah, like I'm like it's just tearing me up. I was just like, it's like I knew her personally or anything, but it's just like, oh, like it's just, yeah, a lot of feels there for sure. All right, so going into the second game of the round, which painful for me to reminisce about. And that was, of course, the game of the round, Lightning versus T-Birds. So they started off with an even quarter. It was very well contested on both ends. There were super shot misses on both ends as well, which I felt was kind of like a very clear indicator that both of the team's strategies were to essentially start sinking super shots early on and trying to pull away with the score earlier. But in the first quarter, that didn't seem to work out for either end. T-Birds did start racking up the penalties in the early part of this game as well, and they were really able to release the pressure on the Lightning shooters, where they were doing a really great job with creating that pressure. Obviously, constantly being called out for either a late contest, or I felt like Latanya Wilson was just needing to pull out of certain contests. There were elements there where she's obviously playing against two moving shooters, where she's coming out of that circle and the timing was a little bit off, and she just ended up essentially colliding bodies with the shooters, and that's why we just saw her being called for quite a lot. And it was good to see that she cleaned that up going forward, and we actually saw a lot less of that on-body collisions, which enabled them to stay in play and create that pressure and essentially dominate the circle as we saw them do for the rest of the game. Standouts were obviously both Laddie and Garrett. Garrett had a phenomenal game, and I think, yeah, definitely one of a highlight reel for her. Those hands of those defenders, Vista as well, like they just have these long arms that come out of nowhere, and so it gives such a sense of false security to the feeders and the shooters to set up for a pass or to feed a ball. And you just, yeah, you can't conceptualize just how much of a reach their arms do have. All of those players are quite skillful with that. Even without Shamira, amongst that group, they all just have like those really long arms and incredible timing. Fru, I thought, had a really, really great game. Definitely one of her best for the whole season as well. I remember I was very disappointed that she didn't have 60 minutes last week, so I was really happy to see her play a full 60 minutes this week, or until she went off with a minor injury towards the end of the game. But I thought she was having one of her career best games, and her confidence in controlling the play in the attacking end for the T-Birds has really grown as well. Like she's moved away from any kind of reliance on shooting, passing to Romelda under the post, and she's really taking a lot more responsibility and ownership over her participation for, adding to the scoreboard as well, and not just in super shot periods. So I've actually been just, yeah, continuously impressed by Fru. I really thought as well, when I was watching the Lightning attackers and they had those long leans over their shots, what we saw is they seemed to be a little bit more prepared in the fact that they were going to most likely have to reset. We've seen the Lightning shooters pass out and reset in that circle all season long, to the points of huge frustration as viewers, particularly when Kara wasn't in the circle. But I think this week showed that they knew that they do that, and they'd kind of started really practicing and perfecting the positions and the structures that the circle edge feeders would need to be on in order to assist with those resets that were more than likely going to be necessary. So I thought that worked a lot better. Having said that, the T-Birds defenders did, essentially start figuring that out. The second quarter, Kara had a lot better movement. She was holding space away from Latanya, whereas in the first quarter, Latanya was really getting the better of her. We actually saw a little bit of a switch up in the second quarter. Kara was able to use her body to hold Laddie a little bit more where she wanted and create the space, which is what we see Kara do week in and week out. It's one of her biggest strengths. I was watching Georgie Horgis in this game, and it just highlighted to me something that she brings to the T-Birds attacking end that so many teams don't have, which is her incredible ability to keep pivoting and redirecting and get out of whatever a defender is shutting her down, to keep being another option. She moves so smoothly and so quickly. She is the kind of player that is always coming out to be an option. She's essentially the Liz Watson for the T-Birds, which I am so excited to hopefully see a Diamonds team with both Liz and Georgie on the court at the same time, because I personally find that when I'm watching Liz, a lot of the time when she's getting called or she's, having those turnovers, in my opinion, it's due to the fact that there's no one coming forward to be a clear option for her. So we see her stuck in positions where she's having to reset the ball quite far past back towards the transverse line, and then again be her own option back to reset. I also thought there were a couple of missed opportunities for Lightning where Kara was actually holding quite well under the post. She was asking for the ball, she was calling for it. There was the option that she was creating as that little bubble of space that she likes to create just near the baseline, and it wasn't being noticed. Exceptional work by the defenders to confuse the feeders and not be able to see that. But I thought that was definitely some missed opportunities. What did you think of the first half of this game, Jenna?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think it was definitely obvious that their plan of attack was to go for those super shots early. We did see them off a little bit, but it came good towards the end. It started off with some good defensive pressure from both sides. And that at that point, I thought, oh, okay, this game is definitely going to be won through defense. T-Bird did have an uncharacteristically high penalty count, but as the game went on, we sort of saw Lightning ease up on the pressure, and we saw T-Bird sort of intensify the pressure. And it definitely started to, get into Lightning. Like you said as well, there was just not enough options in the attack end. It felt like their defense was doing all they could to win them ball, but the attack end just couldn't reward that, which was a bit disappointing.
I did think it was interesting that the commentators didn't notice this either, and we didn't see it on our screens. It was actually after the game that people who were at the game told me that Steph had actually injured herself in the second quarter. She'd landed badly on her knee, or there was a collision, and we didn't see any of that. And she had to essentially, she was looking to the bench and looked incredibly uncomfortable. So unfortunately, that probably would have affected how she played the rest of the game, given that she does have, a history of knee injuries. I can imagine that would have been very much playing on her mind, even the fact that she was left on the court. How much, when you have injured something before, to feel that you are on the edge of potentially doing that again, it does make you hold back. It does make you not play as hard, not drive as hard, not land as hard, because you are so in your mind about, oh my gosh, I don't want to, injure myself. So it was eye-opening seeing that, because I think it made a lot more sense as to why we saw, I think, a little bit less intensity from Steph in the second half of the game. But I think that Steph is still, in my opinion, the best starting seven GA option for the Lightning, just to emphasize on how important it is to have that experience and that leadership on the court, as well as having, the young players coming up who are exceptional, like Rue, and she is an exceptional player, but she's not, in my opinion, ready to take the reins from Steph Fretwell just yet.
What about Kara? We saw Kara 4 for 4 super shots.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did, didn't we? Yeah, no, what an interesting turn of events that is. The player who was, under fire the most at the beginning of the season as being the player who wasn't risking, wasn't taking the risks, wasn't putting up super shots, has now become possibly their most reliable super shot shooter in the Lightning. I'm so proud of her. Like, my goodness, like, she is just such a incredible player to watch, and I love that for her. Like, talk about proving your naysayers wrong. But also very sad as a Lightning fan, of course, that this obviously meant Lightning season has ended for 2025. They finish fifth on the ladder. Well deserved for the T-Birds. At the end of the day, there was no there was no mistaking it that they were the far stronger team on the day. Deserved that win, and they deserved that top four position. So congratulations to the T-Birds, and Lightning, we'll be back next year. Let's get straight into the third game of the round. So the Firebirds versus the Swifts. So, oh my God, I was not expecting that result. Must admit, I was at the zoo with my kids while this game was on, essentially preparing myself to watch Fever later, but I was not expecting this scoreline, and I don't know what happened, whether this was, again, a matter of the Swifts just didn't turn up, or they just struggle so much without Paige Hadley and without Tegan O'Shaughnessy as an option to go to, or whether Firebirds have basically just gone, you know what, we've got nothing to lose, and let's just put out the best netball that we can. And because I would say the last couple of games from Firebirds, they have put quite a few teams under pressure. They haven't gotten the win, but they've gotten close.
Oh, definitely. And it was very similar in this game as well. It really could have gone any way. And to be honest, I actually think could have very well been the Firebirds game. I mean, we started out the first quarter with seeing the Swifts go back to their very freely lobbing it into Grace. It was almost too easy, like there was no defensive pressure. Mary was, I must say, in this game it was really good to see. Mary was looking so much more confident, positioning herself well. Of course, we then saw Housby on early with super shots. So once again, I think the tactic was to get those super shots done early. Once we started getting towards the end of the quarter, we then started to see the play start to get very sloppy from both sides. Swifts making errors, the Firebirds picking up ball, but then making silly mistakes or butchering some passes and losing that opportunity to convert. With the pressure starting to finally increase for Firebirds in the second quarter, we started to see Housby and Grace just start missing shots under the post, short, and it's like they went back to sort of what we've been seeing in the previous weeks, as if the pressure was sort of getting a bit too much to them. We also saw a lot of frustrated play coming from the Swifts players too, especially from the likes of Sarah Clow. There was a lot of late, rough sort of play, a lot of slumping shoulders when getting called contacts, things like that, which I think could have been a moment where maybe the Swifts should have called a timeout and sort of just took a breath. Because going into finals, you can't let your frustrations speak for you. We did also see in the third quarter as well, Imogen Allison again sustain another head injury. On the replay, it actually looked like Maddie Turner came through with the elbow to the back of the head, and we saw Imogen go down and was in quite a lot of pain. And obviously, as she's recently had a concussion, we saw her taken off for a concussion test. What I was very surprised at was, this is where the big question still looms: what is considered dangerous play? I was under the impression that, any sort of head contact was considered dangerous play, but we didn't see it addressed like that. Not even quite sure we even saw the contact hole. It was pretty much just play on. So that was a little bit disappointing. And I feel like there's too much grey area. We sort of need those lines defined, especially when player welfare is coming into it. We did also see a very frustrated Verity as well, who they necessarily felt like the Swifts, the calls weren't going their way. So we did see her go up towards the end of the second quarter and have a chat with the umpires about that because she did receive a warning during the end. Third quarter, we saw that same frustration evident. At one point as well, the umpire actually had to tell Sarah Clow, you need to make an effort to stand out of play. When she'd be called for a contact, she was refusing to stand out of play. We then started to see the momentum shift and the Firebirds started to fight back. Lambton having a crack at everything, but a tad too late, but she was contesting everything, but she was then also called for delaying play in the last few seconds and the penalty was advanced to the circle. And then we went into the fourth quarter. We got to see Imogen Allison come back out, which was really good. So really happy she's passed her concussion test. The Firebirds, something they struggled with the whole game was they just couldn't shut that long bomb down to Grace. The Firebirds end up finishing that game tied, which led them into the overtime. And this is what I've been asking for all season, is just an overtime thriller. And then we saw the first half was goal for goal. They finished that first half tied again. We saw a lot of mistakes coming from the Swifts, very pressured mistakes. So they really started to let it slip. But then we saw an absolute shootout. We saw Mary sinking super shots. We saw both ends sinking super shots. So it was a very intense game. A big question for me, though, was we did see the debutante in Elsa who came on to shoot. And I think the initial intent must have been for her to play out the last couple minutes of the quarter as an end of season debut. But when we went into overtime, we saw Mary benched for her. And I feel like this was a bit of a detrimental decision, in my opinion. I think having Mary on the court and with her experience in those moments, I think would have actually been what probably would have got them across the line. You know, that is so much pressure to put on a rookie, literally game one on debut. And we saw that pressure get to her. We saw it in missed shots and turning over ball.
Like you said, Jenna, like I feel like there's a lot of pressure. It almost just feels like really unfair that was her opportunity to debut. You know, definitely not the most ideal situation to have your first minutes on an SSN court. I'm kind of in thinking the same as you, Jenna. I would say ideally you'd want to finish with your strongest seven on the court and finish it the final minutes of your final game of the season the way that you intend to start the next one.
Exactly.
You know, for a rookie, she got out there. Good for her. I'm sure she did her best, and next time we see her, hopefully it will be under, slightly less stressful circumstances. All right, let's talk about the final game of the round, Fever versus Vixens. This, in my opinion, is one of the most intense rivalries that we have in the SSN competition. I don't think Vixens and Fever fans are necessarily the hugest fans of each other. Like, I don't subscribe to that because I kind of like, I don't know, I guess I'm pretty chill with all the clubs. Like I like all of the clubs, but I do understand that there's definitely rivalries, age-old rivalries between different fan bases. And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna, but I would say this is one of them.
Yeah, it's definitely, always a juicy matchup when they come head to head.
And that did not disappoint in this game either. So we had, obviously it was a home game for us at RSC Arena. And I just want to point out again just how impressive the Fever fans are in that they turned out in, again, another record number. So I think it was 12,800 something. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
That is crazy considering that only last week the 11,899 was the record. And then just a week later, nearly 1,000 more bums on seats. All right, so we started this game with a fairly even playing field. It was a fairly close match. And at this point, we were a little bit nervous. We didn't know what was going to happen because there did seem to be a little bit of disconnect in the Fever attacking end, which we are not used to seeing. That is normally one of their slickest areas on the whole court, is getting those beautiful feeds from either of the Kranzberg sisters straight down, or Alice Teagnell straight into Fowler and Mud. And we did see a little bit of disruption there. That is definitely credit to the Vixens defenders who did their homework, and they really created a lot of confusion there and forced that disconnect. Having said that, it really didn't take long for Fever to figure this out, and they were basically back to, smooth sailing by halftime. We did see the end of the third quarter was a little bit of a controversial moment. So Fever did have a lead at this point. They were up by 9, and then right on the buzzer, we saw a super shot by Kira Austin. That was quite a beautiful shot. It did go in, but unfortunately, it was called as a no goal due to a contact call on Lily Graham right in those final seconds, which was very disappointing for Vixens fans, I can understand. And obviously meant that they started the fourth quarter with a 9-goal deficit, which is already a huge amount of pressure for the Vixens to start that quarter with. Jenna, what were your takes from the first half of the game?
Yeah, so I thought that there was some really good defensive pressure right off the bat from Fever. I thought that the contest between Fowler and Rudy was on very early between the two of them. We did see Zoe start as well instead of Jordan, who we typically see start, but I believe that was because Jordan was still a bit on the mend. And I think that could have also been the reason of a little disconnect, because as similar as the sisters are, Jordan just, that tiny little bit step ahead with that feed in. I did notice a lot the Vixens, they were going for that double pass back out to try and get closer to post. It almost felt like a bit like a final for me. Frantic sort of energy, intense energy between the players. It felt like Fever sort of started the game and they felt a bit frantic. So they felt like they were sort of under a little panic, which was, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't necessarily something that you'd think Fever would have felt going into a game that necessarily didn't affect anything for them personally. The people that sort of had something in a way to lose were the Vixens, who were playing for the rights to a home prelim. As we did see, the game went on, though, we did see Fever, tighten up on that sort of feeding in. And I think that made such a difference. And I must say, it was really good to see Fran on, just like I thought when I went back and I watched round 3, when we saw Lily Graham come on and Maggie Karras. I thought, watch them do the same thing again. And lo and behold, we saw Lily Graham come on, who we know is very clutch on those super shots. And I really enjoyed that sort of contest between her and Fran. I thought Fran was, all over her, and that defensive circle from Fever once again was just absolutely killing it.
I think Sunday Ariane was just on fire. She had quite a phenomenal game. I haven't looked at her stats from this game, but I would say that they're most likely fairly impressive. But yeah, I did think that she definitely had the upper hand on the Vixens attacking end when she was on the court. But overall, like, the whole defensive unit from Fever is just hard to critique. They are just it's like they rotate between the three of them so well, that you sometimes don't even notice that it's changed up, because the consistency and the pressure doesn't seem to ease up. Dan just knows what he's doing with his movements in that defense end.
Yeah, and his rotation of the bench, I think you can really tell is now paying off, having those fresh legs, because no matter who you have on and who you have off, they're just as strong as the next, which is a really good position to be in. Like, that's a position that you want to be in going into a finals campaign.
It's because obviously we are Fever girls. It's hard to feel like we can talk about the Fever games, in an unbiased way. But given their performance, I don't think anyone would disagree with the fact they've been performing just really well across the board, and it's really hard to critique them.
Yeah, so after the halftime break, we definitely saw Fever come out and just put the foot down, which is what we tend to see. We saw less hesitation getting that ball to post and to Fowler. And I think as soon as Fever went back to doing what works for them, you saw such a lift. We saw Olivia Wilkinson come on again, and I think that would be a credit to that rotation that Dan's doing. But as we've previously discussed, when Liv comes on, there can be a little bit more congestion in the midcourt. So we did see Fowler having to come out a little bit more to sort of counteract that. We saw the intensity from the Vixens starting to drop off towards the end there. I think Alice Teague Neal had an absolute blinder, but I mean, at this point, when doesn't she? She was just absolutely incredible in that game. And then we saw the game end on a super shot by Fowler, which was very exciting.
Definitely a nice way to finish your run of 12 undefeated games, which, just breaking records week after week at this point. I do think a few standouts though. I thought Rudy Ellis had one of her best games this season. She definitely was getting some really good elevation and front position on Fowler. We cannot dispute the fact that she definitely put Janelle under a bit of pressure, and she's really, really improved in regards to getting around the body and not being called and getting out from behind that player and getting that front position on those passes. So she was really making Janelle work for those. So I think credit to her for that. We've said before, we're huge fans of Lily Graham as well. And I thought that she just did a phenomenal job in this game. Every time she comes out, she just does her job.
Definitely. She's definitely one to watch, and I wouldn't be surprised if she gets approached by some other clubs in this offseason.
Yeah, yeah, very, very exciting to see the future for Lily. I really hope that she snags herself a starting seven contract. I think that even though she's still quite new, she has been impressive. Very, very impressive.
Definitely. I would really love to see how she'd go with more court time under her belt. I really think she's one to watch for sure.
So who do you think might nab her up in the next season? My money is going to be on either um, Mavericks, who now are going to be essentially like down a goal attack without Cardwell joining the fold. So potentially they might want to nab a little Lily Graham. Otherwise, perhaps Firebirds. Maybe Firebirds would like someone as consistent as Lily Graham. Who knows? But then that might be a little bit of a move for her. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think we are going to see so much movement as soon as this contract window opens, which I believe is the day after the grand final. There are probably three teams that are probably going to have or are due to have a pretty good clean out, and I would say that's Firebirds, Giants, and Mavericks. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes and a lot of movements, particularly to those sides.
Well, that's it from us for the end of the normal season, the end of round 14. Thank you so much if you are still listening. And thank you to everyone who has been giving us 5-star ratings on Spotify and sharing these episodes. Like, honestly, you guys have no idea. We put so much work into this, and it's all just for the love of netball. So thank you so much to everyone who has been supporting us and continues to listen. And don't worry, we will be back next week. Of course, we've got the finals and then Diamonds games after that. So we are not going anywhere. Have an amazing week, and we will see you after next week's semi-finals.